C'est pour nous. Ouais, c'est bon, on a un peu de retour.
Hello.
Good day, everyone. Good day, everybody.
Good morning. I hope you can hear us. That's a bit scary. I mean, honestly, I'm scared.
Okay, we can see some
Okay, so
head
we
shaking.
can see some people that says, okay, good. Please don't switch the light to some of the talks while we talk.
Thank you for joining us today to this talk about CRA and compliance for SMEs. So we will cover various topics today. First of all, introducing a bit about the CRA, just a reminder for those of you who don't know anything about it. What are the challenges for SMEs in terms of cybersecurity? And we'll do a quick overview on the FOSS tools that are currently available today and what's next, what are the future projects. So my name is Mikaël Barbero. I'm head of security at the Eclipse Foundation. The team I lead at the Eclipse Foundation, the goal is to help our project to improve the security posture of their supply chain, but also of their code. I am not a lawyer, so anything I say about law, regulation, and so on, don't take it as a legal advice. If you do anything from it, you will be on your own.
Hello, my name is Philippe Ombredanne. I'm the maintainer of a project called AboutCode. And part of it is a fairly well-known tool called ScanCode, another one called PackageURL or Perl, which is used throughout the security world for vulnerability database and SBOMs. And I've been involved with a few projects in the domain for quite a while.
So, first of all, what you need to know about the CRA to understand a little bit the context of this talk. So, first of all, may I ask you a question? Who knows about the CRA or who've looked into it or read it for the misfortune of you? Okay, so about half of you know about the CRA. So the CRA is a new regulation adopted by the European Commission just October the 10th. So it will be soon published to the official journal of the European Union. And when it will be published, the clock will start ticking for companies and economic actors in the European Union to adopt and enter in conformity with the CRA. So the CRA, the goal is to improve the cybersecurity of products that enter the single market of the European Union. There are various requirements to comply with the CRA, and those requirements depend on which economic actor you are. So whether you are a manufacturer of a digital product, or whether you are an open source steward, like an open source software foundation, or an importer or distributor of product with digital elements. So the wording in the CRA is a product with digital elements, but it can be just pure software, in case you're wondering. So when you are a manufacturer, you basically have to complied with all the obligations within the CRA. But if you are an open source steward, there is a light touch regulatory regime, so you don't have to comply with all the regulation, all the obligations. Those requirements are also different depending on the category of product that you're building or putting on the market. So depending on whether you're a simple product or what the European Commission considers a simple product, or whether it's an important product like a password manager or something with trusted platform thing, TPM, CPUs, this will be a critical product and you have even more obligations. And of course, those products include pure open source software and third-party components. So the essential requirements from the CRA, this is just a quick overview and it's not even complete. But basically, your product will need to be secure by design and secure by default. So you will need to develop and design your product to be secured right from the start. And you will need to detail, to document how you made it secure. You will need to release your product without any known vulnerabilities, and you will need to be able to provide security updates whenever vulnerability is discovered. The vulnerability management is actually a huge part of the requirements from the CRA. So it's not explicitly mentioned that you need an SBOM, but you need to know the components within your product, and you need to watch for vulnerabilities within those components and address any vulnerabilities that are discovered. Nevertheless, there is a specific mention that you need to have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy. So you need an endpoint to receive vulnerability report from security researcher out there and to answer to it in without undue delay. And finally, you need to document all of this and provide some documentation to your users. And as everybody knows, the F in compliance is for fun. So if you need to comply with all of that, that will be a lot of fun.
Yes. And as you may have heard a lot about SBOM, the point is that SBOM is only a small part of the overall equation. And I'm one of the co-founders of SPDX. I'm also involved quite a bit with CycloneDX, and the package URL specs is used both in SBOMs and VEX standards like OpenVEX and CSCF. So I know what I'm talking about more or less when I'm talking about that, and that's really a tiny part. It's a vehicle towards compliance, but it is not the solution to everything and the end of all.
So what are the challenges for SMEs? First of all, if you want to develop a product securely or secure by design, you need to address all the threats that can happen first on your supply chain. And the threats are everywhere on your supply chain, so you need to eventually have mitigation or processes that fight against those threats. And the more you have attacks and threats, the more the forthcoming regulation, the more the compliance will be critical. And it's becoming really urgent with the CRA. The clock will start ticking for the CRA in just a couple of weeks. The challenges for SMEs is that the compliance against the CRA, but other regulations that are forthcoming, are basically the same as big companies, but SMEs don't have the same resources, of course. So how do we do? We think that open source is a solution or the good solution for SMEs to be able to comply with the forthcoming regulations. Because proprietary does not help, proprietary software doesn't help at a scalable, in a scalable ways for your product to comply with the forthcoming regulations. The tools that are out there are usually cost prohibitive for SMEs, and they are not even necessarily efficient or effective for tooling the compliance with the CRA. The cost of business is just much harder for SMEs to compete with large enterprise. Your turn.
Yeah. So some other challenges we have with modern vulnerability management is that there's really an explosion of the volume of known vulnerabilities. Doesn't mean necessarily there's more vulnerabilities than there were before, but now we know about them. And the problem is that if you think about like 15, 20 years ago, say about 20 years ago when the National Vulnerability Database in the US started, and when we started to have a serious attention paid to security issues in software, the world was revolving around Windows 98 and Acrobat vulnerability issues, where today, modern software development, it's very easy to pull together a JavaScript application using containers with 10,000 packages. And you can do that in a jiffy. So there's really an explosion of the volume there. And with this explosion of volume, you have an explosion of the number of security issues that we need to manage across the whole dependency graph. That's one thing. The second thing is, together with that, we have many vulnerabilities, a lot of them which are, in some cases, almost vanity vulnerabilities. If you heard about some things like the regular expression denial of service, there's a lot of these which are being published as highly serious CVs, supposedly, and they're just, in most cases, really very less non-critical, low severity, low exploitability issues. The problem is the fatigue that you have experienced. In the US, for instance, there's a program called FedRAMP for any company that provides cloud service to the federal government. You have to properly address any security issue above a CVSS that's 7 or higher. And if you have junk security issue popping in, you have to process these. The same is going to apply with the CRA, where we're going to have to to process vulnerabilities, a lot of them which are vanity vulnerabilities, and being able to triage and handle the really important things is going to be really a challenge. The other thing is that the traditional approach to centralized vulnerability database, which are keyed by a vulnerability ID, just doesn't make sense. I don't know if some of you have heard about the problem with the National Vulnerability Database in the US since last February. Okay, basically, it's a database that aggregates vulnerabilities from many providers. They're called CNAs. And then there's a process whereby they assign which software product is subject to vulnerability, which is complete nonsense. It's like there's a vulnerability that arrives, and it's as if they didn't know which package this applies to. The world we live in, we know when there's a vulnerability that it's for Log4j or Tomcat or, God forbid, an Eclipse project. But the point is, the vulnerability doesn't exist in the abstract. It exists in a world that's package-centric, and there's a fundamental mismatch between the old ways of doing security and vulnerability management and what we're going towards. Okay, the other point is that a lot of the security data we have is provided by commercial vendors on top. And there's something which is completely wrong to have proprietary data about open source software, especially about the security of open source software. There is no fundamental difference between somebody selling a zero-day exploit on the darknet and a commercial vendor that's going to tell you, I have premium vulnerabilities that you need to buy from me so you're guaranteed to be secured. They're putting a monetary value on something which is critical security data about open source, and it's just plain wrong. And we really need to work to make sure that the security information and high-quality security information about package vulnerabilities is available. Without that, it's going to be impossible for SMEs to be able to comply in any way, shape, or form. So now, if we look a bit at the tools for security.
Yeah, so modern cybersecurity requires open data and open source tools. And we did a quick analysis of what is available today or what used to be available. And most of those databases, for instance, are very vulnerability-centric. So you get those vulnerability databases, the NVD or the database from MITRE. The primary key of those databases are the CV ID. But when you create a product, what do? You consume packages. You want to know what are the vulnerabilities for your packages. You don't care about the stream of vulnerabilities that are coming in there. So really, the future of the tools should be package-centric and indexed by those packages. So the data, just as Philippe said, should be open. No retention on the data, the vulnerability data about open source software. Should be interoperable as well. The silo that can be created by proprietary database, proprietary format, should be avoided at all costs. They must be community-driven, again, the good values of open source, and to decentralize as well, so that you don't have a single point of failure when you want to analyze your software and detect vulnerabilities. Think about NVDs again. NVD has been the central point of failure for a while, and now that they've discovered now that they started to not process as many CVEs report as they used to do, the world have started to feel the pain. Of course, it's not only a security issue that needs to be handled by security team. Developers need to be involved, and in order to do that, they need to be empowered. So all those tools, being community-driven, they need to really provide some additional benefit to the developers. And finally, you need to be in a proactive setup so that you don't wait for the vulnerability to happen and you don't need to wait for a scan to detect the vulnerability. You want to be notified as soon as a new vulnerability is discovered or is being published for the packages that you consume.
Okay, we're going to look now at the different categories of tools which are the most interesting. And I'm going to look at 3 categories about discovery, actually 4. Discovering package that exists in your code, managing and triaging vulnerabilities, looking at the different vulnerability database, and finally, looking at what are the tools that help us with compliance. And I won't go into all the details. You can look at that. The message I'd like for you to take out is that there's great tools that are free and open source software, but there's a lot of work. And I wish that my tools were able to handle it all, but there's no single tool that's able to provide a comprehensive solution today. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think that's something we can do as a community. So let's look at the problem of discovering and identifying code. Say you have a product and you want to know what are the third-party packages and code that you use in this product. Sounds a very simple problem. It's far to be solved. I recently did a study of how different commercial tools for software composition analysis and open source tools manage to analyze common container image, Docker images. And I went in, with a lot of hubris, saying it's going to be easy. We're just getting an SBOM from each of these images, scanning these tools, scanning this image, and then we compare the SBOM, and that's going to be easy. It happened to be really sad. I mean, made me cry. Most of the SBOMs were either incorrect from a schema point of view or didn't have the right content structure. But then when you were trying to compare a package, is there this RPM in this distro, in this image, and is this the same RPM detected in multiple tools? We're not able to get the same things matching. So there's still a lot of efforts to do there, and the problem exists both for open source and commercial tools. If you want that report, send me an email, by the way. It's going to be published in a sanitized version, so not to shame too much the commercial vendors, probably by next week. So if you look at these different tools, in these criteria, can they do scanning? Scanning is about, for instance, finding a package.json for an NPM or a Maven POM. You have an affirmative statement of origin, you have dependencies information, and you have a lot of data about the package. It could be finding license, copyright, and other clues, but that's what I call scanning. In contrast with what I call matching, which is, for instance, looking up a checksum in a database. Say you have a database of all the Maven packages, keyed by SHA-1 or SHA-256. You have a jar, collect the checksum, look it up. There's many more variations to that. It could be approximative. You can look at binary source, but that's the essence. The point here is that we really don't have a tool that does everything correctly across the board. Some of them are doing better, but we have many gaps. There are many tools, though, and there's still a lot of work to do to make this work at scale. So, second category of tools, everything that helps us discovering, triaging, and managing vulnerabilities. And we have these 4 categories. VEX, if you don't know, it's about vulnerability exchange or exploitability exchange. The idea is to have a document that lists which third-party code or your own code is vulnerable to what, that you can communicate to other party so they can do their own vulnerability management on their side. Perl is this package URL I was talking about, which is an important identifier for package, which can be used across different tools and SBOM formats to name a package. These are important to have as a way to enable interoperability across the board. So Perl, as I was talking about a second ago, we are working right now to make it a de jure standard as part of ECMA together with the Cyclone DX TC54 committee. You're welcome to join to help with the effort. The point is that it really started as a grassroots effort on scan code and vulnerable code, and is really used across the board now by all the tools in the space, be they commercial or proprietary. And if you've not used Perl, you should. And if you don't know about Perl, you probably should know a bit more about it. It's recommended for use by the German BSI, the CERT in India, the US CISO, and again, it's really core to most of the SBOM standards. It's essential to Cyclone DX, for instance. So going back to the tools to discover and manage vulnerabilities, we have tools like, actually not so many. There's one tool I work on, which is called CRAVEX in DejaCode. Historically, you have dependency track, which is a well-established tool in the space, but there's very few tools yet which are true open source, which enable this vulnerability management. You have a plethora of commercial tools, so we still have a lot of work to do there, either to enhance these tools so they have better, more efficient capabilities, which is probably preferred, rather than starting a new one, or if you have a need to scratch your own itch, yes, write new tools and better tools that can help us do better discovery, triage, and managing vulnerabilities. I was talking about fatigue, being able to spot and determine if a vulnerability really applies to your own code. Like, is the code that's vulnerable reachable in your product, for instance? Is this for code that you use only in test? All these would be things of importance. Now, talking about vulnerability database, there's many of these. I'm going to go there in a second. The problem is that we have too many, and none of them is providing an effective, mostly global answer to the problem, which is very simply, I have a package version that's used in my product. Is this package vulnerable to what? In which context? And second, what is the version that I can upgrade to mitigate the issue? Or is there another way to patch, work around, and avoid the issue altogether? Here's the space. You have at the top the US National Vulnerability Database I was talking about earlier. And what happened is that because of shenanigans between different US agencies, they essentially stopped being funded the same way they were funded before. And as a result, assignments of severities and which software package is vulnerable, they're behind by tens of thousands of vulnerabilities, which makes essentially the database mostly not useless, but mostly harmless in many cases. Google has an interesting database. The problem is that while the code is open source, the infrastructure is not. But it's an interesting, very interesting approach, and I really encourage you to look at that. They're using some of the code I write, which I found awesome. GitHub provides also a source which is tightly related to the Google OSV database. The problem, again, it's we don't know what the process to produce this data is. It's done in a closed way, a closed process, closed code, and closed infrastructure. Another alternative would be GitLab, but there the infrastructure is semi-open. In this case, they have data which is publicly visible, but with a 1 month delay. And what's good to have vulnerability information if they are outdated by a month. So to give you a bit of an idea, the point here, again, we need to find a way to hone on something which is not like all these different databases, or have a way to distribute all the data so each project, each ecosystem eventually becomes the owner of this data. Talking about process automation, so the ability to aggregate SBOM and inventories from multiple sources on your product, your different vendors, and all the open source package that you consume, and export vulnerability information and SBOM, and being able to convey that with pearls, and also have tools that help you support mitigation is another area. Here again, same thing. It's almost a green field. There are some tools that provide some level of information, but most of it is either not there yet, not fully adapted to the specifics of the regulatory compliance automation, or they're work in progress. And we'll talk about some of these projects. I'm working on 2 of these projects, which are work in progress.
Yeah. So what's next? We need your help. It's open source. Those tools need to be improved and developed. So of course, everybody is welcome. And we're still missing critical parts in tool and processes for CRA compliance. So we wanted to mention a couple of projects that have just started or will be started soon. So the first one is Octet. The goal of Octet, which is funded by the European Commission, the European Union, is to provide a compliance toolkit to simplify the compliance process for SMEs. The idea is that for an SMEs that consume open source project, they will have to do due diligence on the open source component that they consume.
The whole tree at full depth.
The whole tree at full depth. Of course, not every single SMEs out there will want to do full due diligence on their full tree again and again, and it will be duplicate work, and that doesn't scale. So the idea of Octet is to build on the vulnerability databases and include the due diligence attestation, if you want, of open source packages as being made by, for instance, open source stewards or the core developers of open source projects, so that by contributing to this open data, these federated databases, to reduce the cost of compliance for SMEs. So this is a collaboration between the Eclipse Foundation and many SMEs across Europe, including AboutCode, and the goal is to streamline the conformity assessment.
So it's another project which is part of AboutCode, which is called CREVEX, which is also funded by the European Union, and a wonderful program called NGI. If you are working on an open source project and think you may benefit from funding, I strongly encourage you to visit the NLNet Foundation, nlnet.nl in the Netherlands, and NGI.eu as programs. They're wonderful programs that provide support for open source projects. These are small grants, and they're made available worldwide, so you don't have to be Dutch. And as you may have noticed from my accent, I'm not entirely fully Dutch. What we're building here with CREVEX is extension for this tool called DejaCode, which helps manage a portfolio of products and what they're made of, to have a proactive management of vulnerabilities, which is package-centric and using an open source database, and will integrate eventually with Octet. So we're trying to put together many of the things we've talked about, trying to see how we can come with a better solution.
So there are problems to be solved with open source tools and data. Just wanted to mention something that we started recently at the foundation, the ORC, Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group. So to comply with the CRA, you have two options. Either you take the Annex 1, all the requirements, and you go through them and you document how you comply.
That's 380 pages. It's a wonderful reading.
Yeah, and it's the F in compliance, the fun in compliance. Or you can also comply with the regulation by following a standard. But this standard today does not exist, or there is no standard recognized by the European Commission that makes you complying with the CRA. What we do at the ORC working group is to define a specification with the goal of defining this standard or reusing, combining the existing tools and processes that have been published by all the smart folk out there, OWASP, OpenSSF, and others, to define what is the standard to be followed for developing secure software that complied with the CRA. There are already a lot of open source stewards, open source software foundation that are in there, also a lot of SMEs from Europe. More to come. And if you want to join, feel free to reach out to us. The website is online. You can have all the information.
Yeah, I cannot stress how important here it is. We have complex regulation coming up, and it's a way to help shape and come to the regulators and the bodies that are doing the standardization that we will need to follow, and to say, hey, here's our input as an open source community and as SMEs that will be subject to your standards and how we can implement these standards. And it's really important if you can participate. I cannot say how strong this community group can be. Again, if you look at the foundation represented, there's pretty much everyone in the space that matters is present.